I don't want to give short shrift to Mr. Reimer. All set? Okay, great. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this Tuesday, Election Day, May 3rd. Roll call, please.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent. There is a quorum.
Do we have public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
In our packets, we have the minutes of April 19th meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion in a second.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. We have no matters that were moved to the committee, but we do have a discussion, and what I'm going to be doing is when questions come up regarding the jail or the Justice Center, I'd like to concentrate on the jail because that's what's before us, as we all know. And when questions do come up about it, I think it's important that we start addressing not only the questions in executive session like we have, but to let the public in on what we're dealing with as far as the viability of not just the jail, but the other facilities that the county owns. So, Mr. Dever.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Michael Dever, Department of Public Works. Thanks for coming before you today and seeing the committee. It's great to see you. Today, as was requested, if the Department of Public Works could come forward and just give an overview of current conditions in the jail. Matt Reimer has prepared a small presentation for you, and hopefully we can walk through that and take whatever questions you may have.
Okay, appreciate that. And Mr. Miller is on YouTube participating.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Afternoon.
Committee members, Matt Reimer, representing Director Dever. I'm the Facilities Design and Maintenance Administrator for the Department of Public Works. And just going to wait to bring up this presentation. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to give an overview of the current conditions within the jail facility from the Public Works perspective. As context, I followed closely what Administrator Gibson, excuse me, thank you. Yep. Sorry about that. Is that better, Mr. Chair? So I followed closely the presentation last committee hearing of Administrator Gibson, and some of the things that I have on conditions will build on some of those touch points, but we're trying to also offer what our employees, what our trades leadership and our maintenance staff see within the facility, tie those back to the assessments that I know that you know very well from the time on the Executive Steering Committee, as well as things that have been just in the public forum and public discussion on the jail. So let me get started here. As an overview of how we do maintenance, so we have a number of dedicated staff for the jail facility and the Justice Center complex. We have a 24/7 stationary engineer employees that monitor that facility on site, as well as our 24/7 electronic technician coverage. They're monitoring the various fire systems and alarming systems that are that cover the jail as well as the rest of the Justice Center. And we do all of our corrections center maintenance in coordination with the corrections team and with escorts, and a close relationship there as to what the priorities are and where the operational needs are, in addition to what we know the facility needs. So we have dedicated electricians, plumbers, iron workers, and laborers that all support the correction center maintenance. We also have a number of service providers that service countywide, but also the correction center, overhead door, roof services, emergency generator maintenance, and fire services systems and building automation systems. We have a pretty established flow of how work gets established and then entered into our systems and then corrected. We take, obviously, our trades through their observations and know what needs to happen. They will initiate work, but also the corrections team, starting in the housing unit itself, will document deficiencies, route that through their chain of command and into our electronic technician system, enter in the work, and then our trades respond. So we have good coordination there. We also have radio dispatch capability and after-hours support to the correction center and second shift coverage as well for both our vendors as well as our trades. A quick snapshot of looking at the amount of maintenance invested in the last whole year, 2021. Our hours just on maintenance within the jail was the equivalent of almost 18 full-time equivalent trades personnel through the dedicated throughout 2021. That's what the hours show and justify. A lot of information on this chart, but I'm just trying to give you context of what we track and how we monitor maintenance performance within the jail. Every 2 weeks, I present these charts to the corrections leadership team, the sheriff, and the administration. We're tracking our active work orders, which is our workload, how much is open, how long it's going to take us to process through them. We track what kind of work we're doing. Is it plumbing work? Is it lighting work? Is it paint repairs? Those are the types of things we classify those and present them. Quick snapshot data of this. This is our most maintenance intensive structure. When I say that, I mean both Jail 1 and Jail 2. It's about a little over 1 million square footage in building square feet. That's roughly 25% of our county-owned facility building square footage, but our workload there represents over 50% of our workload. So just to reiterate that, 25% of the square footage, but over 50% of our workload is what goes into the maintenance effort within the corrections center. The observations that I'm going to pass tie generally back to the major facilities condition assessment that was performed in 2014, and I'm just going to tie some of those themes back into this. What was said in that assessment about Jail 1, that assessment said that the roofs are irreparable and should be budgeted for replacement. It said the replacement of all windows should be scheduled. It indicated that the 6 main air handlers, ventilation systems, are well past their useful life, and that their supply and return fans are original and well past their useful service life. It indicated that we need to be testing our fire and smoke dampers per the Ohio Fire Code and NFPA. Also said in Jail 1 that the cast iron sanitary piping is fatiguing, cracking, and failing throughout the building, and that, paraphrasing, the domestic hot and cold water piping is now currently within 5 years of its service life. In the assessment, it presented it at that time as 13 years, but we're now within 5.
Okay, this is the 2014
The
study.
2014.
Could you tell us who did that and how it came about and who did the study?
Sure. So the assessment was my understanding, I'll look to maybe the director to correct me, but a joint investment by the stakeholders of the justice system, and it was done by Osborne Engineering and K2M Design, the architectural and engineering firm that were involved in doing a comprehensive planning and condition assessment of all the justice facilities, specifically the courts tower, the police building tower 2, Jail 1 and Jail 2, and the Justice Center atrium.
And that's a brick and mortar and mechanical functions, not programming or anything?
There were some programming elements as to what those stakeholders needed at that time. Obviously, that is overdone by the amount of programming that we've done for this facility in the current committee, but it did have a programming element to it as well. But it had an entire volume, thousands of pages of physical condition assessment.
Mr. Chair. Through the chair to Mr. Reimer, are these that you're going over now, are there any cost estimates for each of these needed repairs?
Oh, through the chair to the councilwoman, yes, there are. In that, I'm just giving you snapshots of some of the major high elements that assessment captured, and I'm going to go into what we observe on a day-to-day basis that substantiates that or not, or what we've done since then to do certain improvements in certain areas. But yes, we do have those estimates. That condition assessment was very detailed in its estimating and did project what they were at that time.
Is it in this presentation today?
Generally, I have some high dollar cost amounts, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, sir. Also, in Jail 1, it indicated that we had outdated locking control technology, and that is the control system that monitors all the different security boundaries and cell door locking controls, et cetera. What did that assessment say about Jail 2, which is now, I should have started, Jail 1, approaching over 45 years old now, went in service in 1976, constructed before then. 1995 was the Jail 2 in-service date. They said about Jail 2, due to the age and condition of the roof, immediate replacement is recommended. So we have roofs on both structures. The exterior sealants require replacement. The air handlers are within 5 years of their end of life and should be replaced. At the time, the laundry washers were not functioning, or at least some of them were, and there were no documented plans to fix or replace. And same thing, the locking controls within the jail were obsolete, and the communication network that was used was proprietary. So those are some of the context statements from 2014 that we've been working towards over the last 7 years now. What are some of the successes that we've had towards that assessment? As the chair knows, we have a pretty robust fire damper inspection and repair program now. It took a long time to get there with your support, and we are fully up to speed on our fire damper inspection and maintenance certifications and repairs. We're now on our second 3-year contract for that program. So that is a success story. We've also, since 2018, had almost $7 million in capital expenditures, and we currently have $11 million in active appropriations for various jail projects that are both active and upcoming. And I'll characterize these as just being the necessities for what, are things that need to keep the jail operational and certified to the best extent and all the minimum jail standards. So we've done in progress and performing work on our electrical distribution system. We have an awarded, as Chairman Tuma knows, on the elevator modernization. We've got an elevator project that's been awarded, $2.3 million, that we're in the procurement phase of that contract. We've done a variety of housing unit condition improvements to a limited number of our housing units. We have an ongoing and coming up on completion of a central booking program, improvements to our booking process and node of operation there. We've done a complete laundry plant replacement, and we're on our second iteration of kitchen repairs, having just completed the kitchen dishwashing modernization 2 months ago. What is still needed and what is documented on the capital plan, and these are the numbers that are backed up by the physical condition assessment that I referenced. We have extensive Justice Center complex roof replacement, currently programmed on our capital plan at $19 million. An extensive mechanical system replacement that involves those air handlers that I mentioned previously. That is the most expensive investment that is needed in our jail facilities, our mechanical HVAC and plumbing systems. The main electrical distribution, we need to replace our switch gears. They're approaching their end of life at almost 50 years, as we approach 50 years for Jail 1. The fenestration replacement, that's the exterior envelope and the window systems, that's recommended for replacement and currently programmed on the capital plan. And our sanitary sewer riser replacement programmed at just under $5 million in the out years as well. So keeping all that in context, I'm going to move into what our trades are seeing and just show you how that substantiates and or differentiates from the assessment that was done.
On the still needed, are those today dollars or 2014 dollars?
So those were 2014 dollars escalated to about fall of last year, okay, which is when we presented this version of the capital plan in the budget hearings. So what are the challenges that our people on the ground face every day and work towards solving for Administrator Gibson and her corrections team? We see a lot of jail cell locking hardware fatigue and difficult to replace parts and pieces. These are door systems that are still in fabrication, but they are difficult to get in the quantities that we typically need them in. And there are obviously more modern security controls that we could benefit from. We have a lot of original security detention grade light fixtures, but they're posing to be, we're seeing a lot of tampering with those existing fixtures and having to replace them out with newer detention grade fixtures, so we have that ahead of us. Administrator Gibson presented last hearing about intercom systems. We're in need of modernizing our Jail 2 intercom systems, and there are currently no intercom systems in Jail 1 from original construction. As mentioned, the age and conditions of our electrical switchgear, our large commercial breakers, 800 amp and higher breakers, and our motor control centers that really run the electrical distribution systems in the jail are approaching that end of life, at least in Jail 1. And we're currently modernizing those systems and performing all the work needed to certify and recondition the breakers in the existing switchgear. But the switchgear project is looming. The age of our plumbing fixtures really becoming problematic to get parts that are adequate for them or to replace those fixtures in whole. We do see a lot of tampering with the plumbing systems that a modern detention plumbing system would solve. We have started to install some water mitigation features that will prevent any vandalism of the plumbing systems, but that's only in a certain number of our housing units currently. We have need to replace just age-based conditions, heart water storage tanks within Jail 1 in particular. We've already upgraded our hot water storage systems in Jail 2. And I mentioned our HVAC equipment needs already. Also, our overhead door systems are critical to the operation of the jail, specifically in the Sally Port and entering and out of. They're very constrained, a lot of wear and tear, and those systems are in need of attention as well. So just getting into some of the visuals, here's a picture of some of our air handling system. What looks like a room in the pictures are actually our, two of our 6 air handlers with the doors that go into them. Not only did we have the 2014 assessment that indicates they need to be replaced, but we further substantiated that by our COVID CARES Act funded HVAC upgrades. We installed our bipolar ionization and our UV treatment systems to better disinfect the air going throughout the jail, but at the same time, it just substantiated that what core equipment we have in there, the air handler and the blowers that move all that air need to be replaced, and they're at end of life. The problem with this kind of project is one of those air handlers is taking floors 1 through 10 in a certain square footage, quadrant or 6 of the building, call it, and taking that offline. So how do you create temporary air for that kind of situation where you're taking 10 floors off of part of the building offline? It's a challenge.
Mr. Chair,
To consider.
one question towards that. To Mr. Reimer, aren't these systems under a routine maintenance agreement?
They are under routine maintenance by our trades, yes, Councilwoman. But the replacement of them just as they approach 50 years old is what is needed. Also, with respect to our HVAC systems, it's not just the air handlers that are within the mechanical rooms, which was on the previous slide. These are actually the induction units and fan coil units that then are distributed and push air and provide the temperature control within the housing units themselves. The valves are old, the piping starts to get mineralized, and it's just age-based things that we really have to start getting into further downstream and replacing, and that's problematic when you have full housing units or ones that you can't easily move inmates around to deoccupy for an extended period of time. Just a quick picture of our in-progress elevator systems modernization in Jail 2. It's a project that we couldn't hold off any longer. We're replacing all the weight handling equipment and all of the controls to modernize them to code compliant conditions per the City of Cleveland Building and Housing Department. We have original and aging electrical distribution equipment in Jail 1. Just a snapshot of that. Again, these breakers, when you get to be this big, they have mechanical components and springs, and as they, are over this kind of age, they need to be reconditioned or replaced, and the switchgear mechanisms as well. So these are the things that offer protection in the event of emergency, and failure becomes an increasing risk as the age of them gets to this 50-year mark. We have a lot of plumbing system issues, as I mentioned, and as presented by Administrator Gibson last week. The center picture in particular just shows, and it's backed up in the statement that I had from the 2014 assessment. You can kind of make out in the middle of the picture a cracked cast iron line. That's just a material failure. That's nothing that can be prevented at this stage, or maintenance that can prevent it. It's just cast iron approaching over 45 years old and starting to fail. So these are the kinds of things that when we find them, they're usually not an innocent find. They're usually because of an emergency or an overflow in the plumbing system that finds that path, and then we have to certainly clean that up and repair that pipe. And you can see the constrained conditions that pipe sometimes resides in, difficult to find chaseways and behind hardened walls. As mentioned, we have, this is a picture of some light fixtures that we've upgraded to higher level security fittings so that things don't get tampered with. We have a lot of that is needed through the facility, and we're working with the corrections team on that now. Have an ongoing facade maintenance program that will probably end up being, we started it in 2018 with the implementation of the city ordinance on facade safety, and so we're continuing our facade restoration work in various locations around the Justice Center, Courthouse Square, and Justice facilities. We do have active work that'll be happening on Jail 1 this season. And this just keeps us in code compliance with the City of Cleveland and for public safety. And then my last example there, we have a lot of wear and tear on our overhead door systems. It's a very constrained environment in the Sally Port. Lots of comings and goings, mishaps happen, and just lots of up and down on those door systems. And that becomes a critical node that we need to continue to focus on moving forward. I wanted to present some successes that we've had in the past several years. As I alluded to just verbally previous in the presentation, the upper left picture is the recapitalization of the laundry plant that we did a couple of years ago, right before COVID hit. The lower two pictures are the kitchen dishwashing project that we just completed earlier this year, and is in use. Upper right is a picture from about 10 days ago of our central booking. This is the new booking area that capitalized on storage space that was down on that Sally Port level. So we will now have an expanded and improved Sally Port and booking area, not only for the administrative functions, but for the central booking methodology that all the stakeholders want to put in place. We've also had a chance to improve and recondition a number of housing units. The pictures on the left and the lower right are ones where we've been able to work with corrections, get into those housing units in a unoccupied status, and recondition all of the systems and finishes in them. And then the upper right, you may recall, as the new housing units that we established on the 4th floor in the former Jail 1 kitchen area a couple years ago. I will say that those took a lot of expense and time, and yet we've only touched 10 housing units in that, when you count all those up, and that's just a fraction of the number of housing units that remain. So while we've had some interim success, there's a long way to go, was the point of that, showing that effort. So this is just, I'll take a risk at creating an analogy. What do we know from what we've observed in the facility and what has been documented in the physical assessments? In my words, it's the equivalent of in the human body needing a new respiratory system, circulation system, nervous system, and digestive system, and a little bit of plastic surgery on the outside as well. And you need to do all that while trying to keep the current jail functioning and compliant. So those are the challenges that are ahead of us in the existing facility. And I'm happy to go back to any of those slides or to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Council President Jones and Nan Baker are here. Mr. Miller has a question. He asks, suppose the best-case scenario that we put a new jail in service in 3 to 4 years, how much of the list of needed repairs would still have to be done because of systems couldn't last that 3 to 4 years?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Miller's question, we are committing to place a close eye on that. In that scenario, for example, when we brought the elevator modernization contract forward, that was our absolute double and triple checking. Do we have to do this now? Are there interim steps available to us? Are there maintenance efforts that we can additionally program to our Schindler elevator contract to do that? And the answer to that question at that time was no. We have to modernize these systems. It's too long. So we're asking that question along the way at every stage. I think the biggest looming issues for us in a best case scenario are still trying to deal with the sanitary piping on the cast iron piping failures, as well as our HVAC compliance, because the HVAC speaks directly to elements in the minimum jail standards that we need to comply with or get marked accordingly from the State of Ohio Bureau of Adult Detention. And we were able to provide our justification and our analysis through our COVID modifications program to get us through the 2021 inspection cycle. But further degradation of those systems, or if we don't keep up with those HVAC systems, those are the ones that I think we may need to invest additional resources in.
A new facility, would we do the AC and heating the same way, or would it be substantially different?
Knowing what I know, Mr. Chair, they would be substantially different because I suspect we would be out of the service area of the Cleveland Thermal utility, which is what we benefit from being in the downtown corridor now. Well, that's the utility that provides the chill water for cooling and the steam for heating. So we'd be having an entire different kind of mechanical plant, chillers, cooling towers, boilers, that more traditional building heating and cooling plant in a off-site facility in the scenario that's currently being considered.
So in essence, the report from 2014 was an indicator to us that all these issues had to be addressed. Not all have been. Many Band-Aids have been applied as we now head into 2022, 23. So ideally, 2014, we would have done something, but we have been lagging behind. So with a newer facility, I would hope that modern technology would have caught up to us as far as applying different techniques and systems within the buildings themselves. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, using your human body analogy, do you see any scenario by which it would make any sense to go back and go through every system that you have listed to, repair those systems, rather than just getting a new human body, to use your analogy?
Right. Through the chair to Councilman Tuma, again, Matt Reimer's opinion and based on my experiences and professional experience, I think it will be difficult to see a technical way forward to replace all those systems if you accept that you still have to maintain a compliant and occupied jail, unless there's some way to navigate, reducing the jail population by over half. Then that's a very difficult proposition to rip out those systems in whole, or ones that impact large swaths of the facility, and put them back, only then to have the same maybe operational limitations that you do. Maybe we're upgrading those systems, but I don't want to speak for the sheriff or Administrator
Right. I mean,
Gibson,
not to cut
you're
you
left
off,
with those same.
I've heard some talk in recent weeks of possibly going back and doing a complete overhaul or refurbish of the jail to preserve the jail and go forward with the jail. And that makes absolutely no sense to me based on what I know of the conditions there and what you guys have presented in Public Works and other committees over the past, 5, 6 years at least. That just makes no sense to me, and I just think it's really important, imperative to move forward with finding a location and getting that new jail built.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones and then Ms. Connell.
As Councilman Tuma said, when it comes to the jail, we've got enough evidence or heard so much that says we can't really, it's not feasible to rehab it or not a viable option. That's fair to say. But the entire Justice Center building, does this speak simply to the jail portion of this vertically tall building? Are you speaking or are you capturing the entire building in this conversation?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What Matt has captured here, and he's done a great job, him and his team, and Dan Paul, who's our lead superintendent and manages the trades, they are maintaining what's currently there. And so what Matt's presented to you today is really just the snapshot of the jails, Jail 1 and Jail 2. So it's not encompassing the entire facility. We can do another presentation on that if you'd like, but this is really specific to Jail 1 and Jail 2.
So for my understanding, and just considering how we move forward, is there a distinction between the two? In other words, if we are able to continue to move forward as been discussed around moving the jail from the Justice Center, building in another location, but what remains, is that now something that is has a viable use? Can that building be maintained? Do all the concerns we've discussed go away, or are they still there for what's left in the building, using your body analogy?
Well, I would say that if we are, the decision is made to move forward, to build an off-site jail in another location, ultimately what we see is those two buildings coming down. And there still needs to be access into the Justice Center because there will be prisoners coming on a daily basis for court hearings, whatnot. So the Sally Port area would be reconfigured, but the overall intent is to bring the two buildings down.
So let me pause you just for a moment. When you say bring the two buildings down, I'm thinking the entire Justice Center, or are you talking just the jail? What are you saying when you say bring the two buildings down?
Well, the two buildings I'm referencing is Jail 1 and Jail 2. So the Justice Center discussion, the courts tower, is still kind of a fluid discussion. But there's been a determination made by the steering committee that we would move forward as a standalone jail. And that's ultimately what we hope to bring before this council in the near future, is to build a standalone jail. So with that being said, we're taking into account then what happens then with Jail 1 and Jail 2. And we foresee that those two facilities ultimately come down. And then maybe we'll be making a determination on what happens with the rest of the Justice Center, the courts towers, because we're not there right now.
I'm not sure I'm grasping. Maybe everybody else is, but we've all been in that building. Our council chambers used to be in that building on the first floor. Keep going up the housing court and all those on floors above. The jail itself is in that building. If you're tearing down, are you saying to me you're talking about tearing down the entire building, or is there some intermediate that you're?
Yeah, we'll come up with, since jail, the lower floors of Jail 1, the correction center, house partially the sheriff's offices and the clerk of courts. There will be parts of that are kept, but the intent is to mothball, or in the short term. We hope to come to a decision on the courts tower in the very near future, hopefully over the next 18 months. And then it'll become much clearer of what type of demolition plan we'd come up with. So we're not there right now, but I think the determination on moving forward with the jail, hopefully we are there and we're able to move forward with that in the very near future here.
And Mike, I'm not talking about the decision or determination. I'm just talking about the options. Right. I think what I'm hearing you say is that we're not potentially talking about a complete demolition down to the ground. You're talking a demolition that certainly would involve the jail, but does not necessarily have to include the prosecutor's office or the
No,
courts
that's
in
correct.
particular.
That's
all
correct.
those things. So that is a little clarity for me.
Right. The reuse of those facilities, they were built, they're a hardened facility for corrections purposes. I think Matt's made mention about some of the dormitories that they've already done some refurbishing in. They had to come up to today's standards. There is no sprinkler system throughout the jail one. Matt had to put a sprinkler system specifically on that fourth floor, yeah, the old kitchen area. So, that's one of those standalone things that we had to do. But as for the use of that facility into the future, we really see it's not a good idea for the county to try and put money back into that building,
Into the jail portion.
into the jail portion.
But if you demolish the jail, and again, it's not a decision, it's just obviously a discussion. If the courts stay, if the prosecutor stays, the clerk of court stays, are we still talking insurmountable rehab costs?
Once again, we believe for jail 1 and jail 2, yes.
But if those are torn down, jail 1 and jail 2, what remains? Do we still have those overwhelming concerns of how do you rehab? Do those also go away with the demolition of jail 1 and jail 2?
Well, they do for jail 1 and jail 2, but for the rest of the building, that is still something we're going to have to make a decision on. So if you choose to stay in the courts tower, how operationally we're going to be able to rehab a building when it's currently occupied, that's going to be a significant challenge.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to Director Dever or Mr. Reimer, Councilman Jones asked one of my questions, but in terms of for the future repairs of the new location, if decided, what will the ultimate repairs as the building ages compared to this old jail 1 and jail 2? So if we go forward with the new one, it's going to age. Can you kind of explain what those, it'd be less, more savings,
Through the chair to Councilwoman Conwell, I would say that the process by which we would, and you saw some presentation by Mr. Gibson last meeting on this, in a modern facility now, as that ages, we do gain a lot of efficiencies in maintenance by having, the type of architectural layout that allows for maintenance servicing of these facilities without being in secure areas of an inmate population and that taking time. And that speaks to one aspect of it, just being more efficient in our ability to maintain that facility. But to your point, things age, and there is a cost to ownership of any facility. That is expected, and I will leave it to the certainly to the experts on that are doing the cost analysis of that total ownership cost to factor that in. But yes, things will age. There will be capital replacement of HVAC systems of any new building in the future. Chiller systems you can probably anticipate in the 25 to 30-year mark with some maintenance and rehab along the way. Boiler systems, 10 to 15 years. Our current modern boiler systems. So those are we would have those interim replacements. We're going through some of that programming now on our juvenile justice facility. Those projects you can see on our capital plan that are in the budget book, as well as that come before Chairman Tuma's committee, those contracts. Those are the kinds of things that you would see in a new facility. As well as, eventually technology, there'll be obsolescence in that. So you will see repairs, you will see maintenance, and plan accordingly. It won't be to the level that the maintenance burden on this, 45-year-old facility is, though, that's for sure.
And it should be some savings because it won't be built as high. So you're going to cut down on a lot of levels.
There are a lot of challenges to the logistics involved in working in the urban environment, certainly.
Okay, so as they're doing that cost assessment, I'd like to see that And I apologize, I wasn't at last Tuesday's meeting, so I'm asking a question I could have found out prior. But my other question would be, under your still needed list, those items there, I just want to be clear, totals around $92 million. Are these the still needed? Are they worked anyway in our capital plan, budget plan now?
So to that question, yes, they are. And for clarity, the way the physical condition assessment presents them, the 2014 assessment that I summarized and that I took and escalated, those are in some cases for projects that involve the entire Justice Center complex portions. Some of them are only the jail portion. So if you wanted granularity on what's in the capital plan and what that represents, I'd be happy to provide more granularity on that. I wouldn't want you to assume that I was trying to give you context on what the order of magnitude is and the types of problems are, that big problems that face the current facilities. But those persist throughout the remainder of the Justice Center complex as well.
And they're phased in with your capital plan?
They are. They're currently in the 22
share that
to
with me, I'd
26 capital
appreciate
plan.
it.
I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's a good overview. You have a little better understanding. Is the Oswald engineering study available?
The Osborne, just for
The one that
quick
you're
correction,
referencing from?
yes, it's my understanding it is. I believe there are 2 volumes. One, I believe, is available.
You'll actually be getting a copy of that.
I was going to say, we should have
We
a,
printed it last week.
good, we should have a copy of that.
A couple
And if
thousand
it's,
pages or something like that.
It's extensive. There are a couple of,
Extensive.
with respect to the jail, there's a couple of key annexes, though, that present the physical condition summary, so we could target your reading on that if you wanted.
okay, good. I think having that and showing that it was done, and it was done thoroughly, is helpful. The second thing, back in 2014, when this was done, the building was 37 years old, because it was built in 1977. So was there not, what prompted the study? What is it that, 37 years, did we do the type of things at the 15-year mark, at the 20-year mark, at the 25-year mark, as you just explained we would do with the new jail? Why did this study come back with such a poor result? Wasn't there routine observing of the building during those 37 years?
I would say that there was routine maintenance, and I can go back and look at the capital plan for over the last 20 years that's provided by OBM and ultimately move forward. So there was routine maintenance done. To the highest level, obviously, the county commissioners at the time making decisions on what's going to move forward. I can't really speak to why certain things weren't done. But a general maintenance plan, were there dedicated or staff that was specifically assigned to that building? Yes. Before Dan was there was a large group of tradespeople that were taking care of the building. So there was a maintenance plan going forward. But I think, as Matt has referenced here, we're coming to the end of the useful life on a lot of the systems, and that's the challenge going forward. We're trying to take care of life safety so that both Rhonda and the sheriff feel like, the building's safe for us to house prisoners, and those are the key things that we're moving forward with, much like the conveyance system, the elevator system that you give approval, so that we can continue to make sure people are safe in the building, they can get out in time.
Had we, if I may, had we done what we're talking about doing now in the new jail and making sure that the capital improvements, not just regular maintenance, is done, what is the life of a building? What would this building be in a place where we wouldn't be talking about a new jail if that maintenance was done and capital improvements were done and roofing was done and HVAC and all those things that are now in such disrepair that it's not a logical step to go back and try and fix it all? Where are we in the new jail in thinking the life of a new jail and what regular capital and routine maintenance, how many years?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, I'm not trying to put this on a new jail facility, but in any new construction opportunity, you're typically planning for a 50-year time horizon, and then beyond that 50 years, you're looking to do life extension work that could carry the building on into the future beyond that. So these kinds of major systems replacements would be those life-extending kinds of investments to get the building generally beyond 50 years. That would be my professional answer to you. I mean, in one context, just in the condition of the buildings, those systems might be able to be modernized for, the existing structure, but functionally appropriate for a correction center moving beyond 50 years, that's where it becomes, and the difficulty in which you need to operate in the interim, that makes it very difficult, in my opinion.
I do understand that, and I understand that functionally a tower and even with the justice system, it's not feasible. It's not but back then it was. Back then it was the way to build a jail. It was built as a jail. It wasn't a converted building to a jail. It was built for a jail. And if proper capital improvements were made, as we're going to make in the new jail, perhaps we wouldn't be looking at a 45-year devastating, what are we going to do to keep the new jail so that we don't have to build another in 50 years.
If I may respond to that briefly, Mr. Chairman, I'd say deferring that capital work certainly has a cost of deferring it, but it doesn't eliminate it from ever needing to have happened. So you're still having to consume that cost at some point in the history of the building. What you're doing by deferring it is you're taking on more risk as to the level and kinds of failure that you'll have and your disruption to operations. So that's really where that continuum goes on. You're not avoiding it by any means. If we would have done it then, maybe we bought down risk now, but that's how I would answer that.
All right. The ADA piece, have not heard it mentioned. So is that included in your price on this building of whether or not we can convert what was built in 1977 to the standards of 2022?
I did not present anything today on accessibility, but certainly as documented in that 2014 assessment for the entire justice system complex, there are clearly accessibility improvements to bring that up to not only current Ohio Building Code, but to our adopted universal design standards would be needed and required.
And then, if I could also, and then the standards of ODRC also.
Right.
Of the size of the jail cells, and I'm sure Rhonda or somebody from her team could speak about that currently, if we are going to do an improvement to it, then we have to come up to their standards, which are larger cells, daylighting, things of that nature.
Just to conclude, in the 2014 study, was there a final, on the last page, this is what it would cost to bring this jail, and then can we take that number and put it in today's money? Was there such a price tag along with that 2014 study?
There was, if you accept the fact that that was the assessment at the time, as well as there are certain things that we've done or been directed to do since that time. So, but yes, at that time there are cost figures associated with that assessment. Yes.
Okay, and that's included in the report when we get a chance to see it.
Yes.
And that includes the ADA updates.
It does.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
And I recall the ADA was $250 million for courthouse, justice center, jail 1, jail 2. $250 million. Yeah, what the heck, Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Weimer, going back to Councilman Jones' point, the tear down of jail 1 and jail 2 is the cost. What is the cost of demolition incorporated into the figure of the new jail if it goes forward? So you talked about demolishing jail 1 and jail 2. What would that cost look like for us?
So it was not included in the cost of building the new jail. The key thing that needs to be part of the new jail is the sally port, the entryway to bringing the prisoners on a daily basis back into the facility. We can accommodate them with those first 4 floors of corrections be able to accommodate to access the court system. So we do not have a number on the demolition of the two facilities, though,
Okay.
yet, but I can pull that together.
Okay, would that be incorporated in how we're trying to pay for this package eventually?
It would be ultimately, yes. So
So the cost as it stands now with the jail, if we go forward with the new jail, where's that at?
So right now, the number that has been made public is we're in the $550 million range. We were going to try and what we're going to do with jail 1 and 2 is, as the court's discussion continues on, that will bring clarity on what's going to happen with those two buildings, looking at the entire complex. So are they demoed immediately or what? We're not there yet.
Okay, thank you.
I have one, if you don't mind. So, just before we leave, just to get a little clarity on the Justice Center, how can that building that is also aged and has many of the same issues that we talked about with the jails, how can that possibly be something that would be achievable to bring back? Capital improvements probably have been lacking. Maintenance have been routine, but also, I mean, where are you in believing that the Justice Center has an advantage that can stay and be feasible to continue to operate, and even given the ADA piece? How can that possibly, why are we not pretty clear on that?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Baker, so what I presented today were tried to be specific to the jail, but you're correct in translating that the same condition assessment identified, very similar age-based equipment and systems needs in the remainder of the Justice Center complex. We have documented those needs as well on our capital improvement plan, alongside all of the jail needs. In my position where I sit, watching the director work with the Executive Steering Committee on the long-term planning, I've tried to assume the worst-case scenario that no decision is made, and we present that capital plan that needs to be done to the existing facilities. How we do it is still hard to envision, how we can physically pull that off, but I would say it's easier to envision for the court system and the other tenants. It's one of the reasons why we pursued and were approved for the acquisition of the police building. That can give us some opportunities when it gets into how we, what are the alternatives for the remainder of the Justice Center complex. But to your point, the same kinds of documented deficiencies exist in that 2014 assessment and assessment since then, as you saw with the same age buildings on the jail side.
Osborne engineering study of 2014 includes the Justice Center,
Yes, it does.
and it also comes with a price tag? Thank you, Chair.
And again, those are 2014 numbers, so if you could kind of update, and we won't hold you to them, just ballpark it, when we get that. They're upstairs, actually.
Okay.
And some of the interesting questions are, and decision was made to do the jail until it wasn't made to do the jail. We're all aware of the dragging of the feet, and in my opinion, wasting of money and time going over what we've already accomplished. I find it interesting, and you don't have to answer, but I'll state for the record that you've been basically warned by the prosecutor's office to tread lightly on some of these issues because of fear of lawsuits potential in the future and lawsuits present. So we have the prosecutor on one hand saying, be very careful in what you say, because anything he says, honestly, in committee, before God and country, will put us in jeopardy. So if you're not concerned about truth, we spew it. We don't do that here because we're under a cloak of legal ramifications, so to speak. I just find it incredibly ironic the very people that put us under that cloak are the ones dragging our feet. But I'm going to continue these meetings, and we're going to start opening up with removing that cloak and being honest. And it's not these gentlemen's fault. That order is going to be removed when you're in this room in front of this committee. And we're going to tell the public what's going on. And the truth will shine through. Talk to Ken Mills about that. We saw what happened there. I got a bad sense that that's the road we're going down again. And I personally don't want to be part of that anymore. Any further questions for these gentlemen? If you could redo those numbers on the 2014, and again, that's brick and mortar, that's functional mechanicals. It doesn't get into programming, which the committee has dealt with time and again in memoriam. And now we're being asked to go back and do that, which again, I've expressed I'm completely against, but that's a decision for others to make other than myself individually. So thank you for the update. Warden, is there anything that you might have for us today? Now that we're speaking of your building, I call it your building because you're the warden, so.
That would be correct. Good afternoon, everyone. In talking with Matt Reimer, I said I would just circle back around on how some of the things that he discussed affect operations. So I'll just touch on a few things. I did mention these in my last presentation. But when he talks about the number of work orders associated with the jail, we're talking many, many, obviously. The current design of the building, as he said, involves a lot of his staff. It involves a lot of my staff. When his people walk through the facility, that requires escorts. Some of those are planned, some of those are emergency repairs. In addition, some of those items, hypothetically, a light fixture that they've been able to dismantle some of the older ones, that requires moving inmates, locking people down in those areas so that the maintenance can work. So if you have 2 light fixtures in a housing unit, that can affect 1 unit for the day. So we appreciate being able to work together with Public Works on that, but it is a lot of collaboration to try to minimize the disruption in the jail operations. I'll also talk about the, get my notes in line here. Matt Reimer talked about replacement of the roofs. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of being inside the jail when there's a significant rainstorm, and the correctional staff will bring garbage cans and buckets and actually big moving totes to sit in the hallways to catch the water as it's leaking even on the 4th floor. And so over time, that water obviously causes structural damage, and there are also parts of the jail from water, from moisture, that has caused some rusting of metal in some places. Now, while it might not significantly affect the security of it, it has been items identified by the Bureau of Adult Detention that should be fixed and or rectified. Air handlers, another item that Public Works has hit on today. Significant improvements made by the COVID dollars, as Matt indicated, but how does air handlers affect the jail operations? If you can figure that one area might be at 70 degrees, but another area is at 90. And that's even true in the warden's office area, where I can speak personally, where the associate warden offices are 85 degrees, but mine is at 65. And we're literally, 20 feet apart from each other. So bringing consistency makes everyone happy, especially the inmates. Inmates don't have a lot of opportunity to get warm other than additional blankets, additional clothing. And for security reasons, we try to maintain control and management of those items. Another item on the list was the obsolete lock system. I cannot speak enough on the importance of having an up-to-date and current lock system within a jail. Jail is inherent to its locks, its doors, and its cameras. And I would submit that all three are obsolete at this point. We have significant blind spots as far as camera goes. You have actual correction officer posts where their sole function is to open 2 doors every shift. And to me, a newer system would allow you to move the management of those doors to another location. And you can even collapse your staff just a little bit more because in a newer system, you can transfer the operation of areas of electronic doors and cameras. Makes everything a lot more efficient when it's possible to do so with appropriate staffing. Sallyport doors was another item that Mr. Reimer addressed. Sallyport door in a jail is no different than an access door. It's about who you're allowing in and who you're allowing out. The Sallyport doors need repaired frequently, and I would say those need to be upgraded to a thicker version and better electronics for our correctional center. Those are the big items I just wanted to talk about. I'm very thankful for the restorations that we have done, as Matt said, to 10 different units. Unfortunately, with the current population of the jail, we would not be able to move forward to do any additional units because I have no place to put them. So when our population went down with COVID, we were able to move some people so that they could focus specifically on a unit. I don't have any available units in order to do that. And of course, we have to be cautious about COVID and if that's going to ramp back up because we have to dedicate units for COVID-related reasons if the numbers go back up again. Any questions from anyone on what I've talked about today?
So, just focusing maybe on one piece that's easy to understand, the roof leaks. So when a roof leaks, water sometimes is the worst kind of damage because not only does it leak and get everything wet, but it also can create mold. And if it does it long enough, the structure of the building is weakened, and water damage is really probably one of the worst. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were bringing in buckets, how long ago was that? When you have a house that's leaking or a building that's leaking and you detect the first time you get a drop, you're usually right on it because of the damage that it could cause. Mm-hmm. I know that our Public Works does an outstanding job in making sure that when something like that happens, they're right on top of it. So what happened with the roof leaks? And maybe that's more of a question for Matt, but why is it that it got to the point where we were bringing in buckets?
I would have to defer to Public Works on that to give a better answer as far as why that continues.
I also give you some firsthand. When I was at the courthouse, when it rained, we would bring in the 55-gallon buckets, and they knew exactly where the water was coming, and it was usually through a light fixture. So for whatever reason, the water was generated towards the light fixtures. And throughout the courthouse, from the basement to the 4th floor, you would have 55-gallon buckets strategically placed. And that was like 15 years before they did the roof. So it's like...
It can leak a lot of places. It can leak in the HVAC. There's lots of places for water to go, but Usually, you get right on top of that as soon as you see a drip because of what you just said. It only gets worse as the rain deteriorates how it comes in.
I would assume it was a money thing, but it was 15 years before they fixed it.
Mr. Chair, to Councilwoman Baker, in general, when we have a roof issue like that, we have and have currently a roof services contract provider that will come out and do their best to mitigate what they can find and investigate as the source of that leak. We do that frequently on the Justice Center complex and on both jail roofs. But to say that doesn't remove the recommendation and the age-based need that those roofs do need to be replaced. That, as I said, from the 2014 assessment till now, that is still the what is needed. I can say that we've been significant investments into our countywide roofing systems, other locations, the old courthouse, Virtually Brown, Harvard Road, Men's Shelter, Jane Edna Hunter, all have new systems, and we've put a lot of focus on that over the last 5 years in capital improvement planning. Certainly, this complex needs that as well.
And Matt, why
remain.
where were we 10 years ago? I mean, these drips of this water's been coming in for a while, and we're now, understanding that and getting to the point where it needs a new roof. There's nothing we can do. The water's just coming in everywhere. I guess because I have seen such outstanding work with all our other roofs in the county. What happened to this roof that we didn't be more proactive in trying to make sure, given the age of the building is now 45 years old, 10 years ago it was 35 years old.
Right.
You may not be able to answer that, but that's some of the perplexing questions that seem to loom over this project.
I can't really answer other than to say that we try to take a look at our capital improvement plan with the highest priority needs. Those have focused, at least within the correction center, to be other areas with the perception maybe misguided that we've been able to keep up with leak mitigation just through our existing maintenance and services providers. But clearly, if that's happening every rain, then we haven't avoided that, and now we've realized the need to replace.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What type of roof is it? Flat?
Off the top of my head, it's two different systems in Jail 1 and Jail 2, but I can get you the exact kinds of roof systems offline.
Okay, and
I'll have to look it up
and so it sounds like
accurately.
it needs to be done before whatever's determined about the new jail. Is there any way to look at, or like green roofs, things like that, for the sustainability department, where we might be able to get some solar or some? I don't know.
Certainly, we have looked at that on our other roofing projects. As you may know, we're about ready on the new roof. We designed that to have I think it's almost a 1 megawatt solar array that Department of Sustainability had championed several years back. That'll go on to Harvard this year. So we do incorporate those kinds of considerations into our roof projects. I would have to defer to our planning and design as we get into that, and if we need to do it for this building.
So if I could, just in regards to the roof, so we do have a very clear maintenance plan, and we move forward with that and we take care of it. We are in this kind of gray area right now. Are we building a jail or are we not? So we can continue to make investments, and we're trying to do them strategically, and meaning specifically the life safety, the conveyance system, the elevator system. We're trying to take care of that. But the roof system, it's going to be close to a $10 million project for, Jail 1 or whatever. So do we want to make that investment, or are we moving forward with the new jail? And if we're going to move forward with the new jail, and I think we're pretty close that we're going to be doing so, then let's make the investment in the long term in the new jail. Matt has these maintenance contracts that can go into effect, where they are in effect. We've had these maintenance contracts for the last 25 plus years. So we are taking care of these things. But now we're at the end of the useful life of these. So are we going to make a decision? And the hope is, within the next few months here, there is a decision. Are we moving forward or we're not? And then if we're not, then all of a sudden we've got to turn our eyes back and say, okay, then you're going to see all these other capital improvements starting to march forward with, replacing systems throughout, jail 1 and jail 2.
That's what I was getting at. If you had like some timelines of when these projects would absolutely at their latest need to be implemented, so we can have an idea of when that,
Right.
everybody else, we thought this jail thing was behind us, but.
Right.
being
Well,
able to-
the challenge, they're all on the capital, the 5-year capital plan right now. I have an allotment of dollars already set aside. The challenge, once again, on systems is working with the sheriff administration and Rhonda's team, because you've got to clear out, for the systems in the building. Not the roof system, obviously, that's not impacting her moving people around. So that's one of those items we can advance fairly quickly. We have the maintenance contract. I believe we can stay with that maintenance contract for the next 3 years to maintain the roof until, a new place is built, if that's where we're going.
And that water is not on any inmates, is it?
No, I'll let Rhonda speak to that, but obviously, if there is issues in a specific cell and there's water coming, she's taking people out of there, and then we're trying to mitigate that with our maintenance contract.
Thank you.
I just gave a scenario 1 leak that's in the hallway in, between the 2 buildings, and what the staff do when there's a significant rainstorm. And, many years ago when I worked at a roofing company, it was called chasing a leak, because the water doesn't always just run down, right? And so sometimes chasing those leaks in a big building that size is fairly difficult. But Public Works has always been responsive, but the leaks come back, unfortunately.
But nothing in the inmate cell at this time?
No, we would report those immediately, yes.
And what little I know about construction, the waste pipe is the crock or the cast iron. And that wears from the inside out. And it looks like it's big, strong, and hefty until you can poke your finger through it, and then it's a waste. We're at that point where just about all of that would have to be replaced. In essence, what we're talking about, what's being requested of this council, is to revisit decisions that were already made about building a new jail, about rehabbing a 50-year-old jail, which hasn't, as far as I could tell right now, hasn't been done in the United States of America. Maybe Mexico and some third world countries have done it, but not in the United States of America. Not because people didn't want to do it, is because of the regulations that the federal government and the state governments have that those buildings don't qualify for anymore. So to rehab that building is ridiculous, outrageous, incompatible with reality, and again, removing the cloak of stupid, a stall tactic. And I've had it. You'll be getting a letter soon identifying all of this, and I'm sure the plain dealer will enjoy it. I know the editorial board, I've just discovered, has a direct connection with somebody on the committee in executive session. I'll be identifying that too. Little something for our friends. Oh, oops, you're not here. Probably get a phone call later on. But anyhow, are we done? Oh, one more.
Real quick. The director mentioned the service contract with the jail, another 3 years. Is that a similar situation with the Justice Center as far as the contract? Are we gonna run into the same issues as Councilwoman Baker was talking about? Are we gonna run into the same issues with the Justice Center with having capital projects that need to be completed?
So the contracts that I mentioned in this specific one are for countywide services that include the current Justice Center facility. So they cover, so we will have those contracts moving forward, clearly, because we have other facilities to maintain. But with respect to, the walking the tightrope of when do you invest versus a decision as to move forward, and what are you trying to avoid, costs you're trying to avoid, that's would be a live discussion within our department, and obviously based on steering committee discussions and decisions.
Right, and that's my understanding, and that's my concern as to, how this whole jail and justice center got divided into two separate projects. It started out as one, now it's two separate projects, and, that's a concern, I think, to myself and several of my colleagues as well, but thank you.
And we have a timeline on that. Okay. One more? Okay, one more.
Is there water coming into the courtrooms?
Sometimes.
So we have had, Councilwoman, I believe it was just before your arrival, but we had a failure. We have mechanical rooms on top of all of our court floors. So we have 2 levels of indoor space. So it would be unlikely, and they also don't share building perimeter. It would be unlikely that we would have water coming in to our courtrooms unless it were a ventilation or plumbing system failure, which we had one major event back in, I believe, the 2017 timeframe, where we had a failed water storage heater on the 24th floor, and that it caused extensive damage on the 23rd floor courtrooms, but not from external elements. That it'd be unlikely based on the construction of the building.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, quite a menagerie of things that we have to deal with. The good news to Mr. Tuma's question is ultimately, in the end, and I keep saying it, the decisions will be made by the 11 chairs up here in the end, with hopefully the understanding from the executive. But those that write the checks will make the decisions in the end. So, as we've been told, it's going to be a big bill. Okay. Thank you very much. Rhonda, we'll be seeing you again, I'm sure. We want to touch more on security. Is there any miscellaneous business? Happy